before cities, before kings, before history itself, there was him, a shadow wandering the edge of firelight, wrapped in dust and silence. He had no name, no language, but every step he took would carve the path that led to us. This is the story of Homo erectus, the first great traveler of the human line. More than 2 million years ago, long before Homo sapiens drew their first breath, he walked out of the cradle of Africa into a world ruled by monsters. A world where the earth trembled under the steps of mammoths, and where rivers hid crocodiles longer than a car. This was the dawn of courage and the beginning of fear. The first light of day bleeds across the African savanna. Mist curls above golden grass, shimmering in the cool air. A lone figure moves between acacia trees, tall, lean, balanced on 2 feet. He is Homo erectus, the upright man, his brow heavy, his jaw strong, his eyes scanning the horizon with the first glimmers of understanding. He pauses at a watering hole. The surface is still, reflecting clouds and sky, but he knows better than to trust calm water. Somewhere beneath ancient jaws, wait, splash, a ripple. He backs away, clutching a stone core, his weapon, his tool, his lifeline. This was not yet the age of safety. It was the age of instinct, sharpened by hunger and the constant scent of blood. To survive here meant to adapt. Erectus was not the strongest animal, far from it. His flesh was soft, his teeth dull, his claws non-existent. But he had one thing no predator could match: mind. Within that heavy skull, a brain twice the size of his ape ancestors sparked with curiosity. He learned that a sharp edge of stone could slice flesh faster than teeth. He learned that broken bones meant marrow, and marrow meant life. He learned to watch, to wait, to remember. Every tool he made was a small act of rebellion against extinction. He chipped stone upon stone, sending sparks of possibility into the wind. When one struck a dry leaf and smoldered, something ancient stirred in him. Fire. He didn't yet know how to create it, but he learned to guard it, to feed it, to fear it. In that trembling glow, Homo erectus discovered the first god. Night falls over the savanna like a slow eclipse. Hyenas scream in the distance. Lions rumble close. The little tribe gathers around their captured flame, eyes wide, breath shallow. They do not speak in words, but in looks, gestures, grunts, a language of survival. Behind them, darkness crawls with unseen eyes. This world belonged to predators. Saber-toothed cats the size of bears stalked the forests. Crocodiles dragged prey into blood-colored rivers. The air reeked of rot and wildness, but Erectus did not run. He learned to walk through danger, to read tracks in the dust, to sense when the silence of the grass meant death was near. Every night he survived was a victory written in evolution. Fossils tell us that males stood up to 6 feet tall, their bodies lean and built for endurance. They hunted not by ambush, but by persistence, chasing wounded animals for hours until exhaustion brought them down. They were the first true walkers, the first to see the world as something to cross, not to hide in. With each migration from Rift Valley plains to the mountains of Eurasia, Erectus became the first explorer. But exploration had its price. Beyond every new horizon waited a new terror. Giant hyenas, monstrous crocodiles, and carnivores with teeth like daggers. The fossil record shows that many fell, bones crushed, skulls pierced. Yet, they kept going. They crossed deserts, rivers, and mountains, driven by something unseen, something that would one day be called curiosity. In the campfire glow, we can almost imagine their faces. The father sharpening a stone axe with slow patience. The mother weaving leaves into bedding for her child. The young one staring into the fire mesmerized, perhaps wondering why it danced. They had no words for fear, but they felt it. No name for hope, but they carried it. Every night was a gamble against extinction. Every sunrise, a small miracle. And yet, they thrived. For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo erectus endured storms, beasts, hunger, and the unknown. They spread across Africa, Asia, and Europe, the first humans to claim the world as home. Their story isn't just about survival. It's about the first flicker of intelligence in the dark. The first time flesh dared to challenge fang. The first spark that would one day become us. When you look at the stars tonight, remember, you come from a line of wanderers. And the first of them, barefoot, hungry, trembling, once stood before the fire and refused to die. He was the first explorer, the first dreamer, the first human. He was Homo erectus. Africa, 2 million years ago, a continent alive with thunder, The air trembled beneath the weight of creatures so vast, so fierce, that even the earth seemed to bow beneath their steps. It was not yet the Africa we know. It was an older, wilder realm. Savannas stretched unbroken to the horizon, rivers swelled like serpents, and forests hid shadows of things beyond imagination. And into this primeval kingdom walked Homo erectus, fragile, fearless, and terribly mortal. From the hills of the Rift Valley, a small band descends at dawn. Their footprints trail behind them in the red dust, weaving between bones of giants long dead. Each one carries a crude hand axe, glinting like chipped glass in the sun. They move quietly. Every sound here means life or death. The cry of vultures, the grunt of lions, the distant roar of something heavy moving through brush. The leader halts. A trembling vibration hums through the ground. Moments later they see it, a civatherium, a giraffe of impossible proportions, twice the height of a man, its skin patterned with fading ochre spots. On its head, two horn-like structures curl like crowns. It turns, chews lazily, and vanishes into the heat haze. To Erectus, this is not beauty, it is scale, a reminder of how small they truly are. But size did not always mean safety. In the shadows of acacia trees, danger crouched low. Amber eyes flicker, tails twitch, and the silence snaps. A Dinophalus, the saber-toothed cat, explodes from cover. Its fangs, longer than a man's fingers, glint white as ivory. It strikes not with speed, but with weight, a thunderbolt of muscle and rage. The tribe scatters. Dust, screams, motion. One young male throws a stone, a desperate, useless gesture, but it distracts the beast long enough for the others to flee. The cat drags its prey away, and the plain falls quiet again. Later, as vultures circle, the survivors return. They take back the body. They mourn, not with words, but with silence. This was Africa's law, the eater and the eaten. Even the rivers were ruled by monsters. When the sun burned hottest, the tribe sought water and found death. From beneath the muddy surface rose a shadow, long and ancient, a crocodilus anthropophagus, 25 feet of armor and hunger. Its jaws could crush bone like twigs. The water boiled red, and the survivors ran screaming from the shore. The fossils we find today tell this story in scars. Human bones punctured by crocodile teeth, skulls dragged into riverbeds. To drink was to gamble. To cross a river was to enter the mouth of an ancient god. But not all giants were killers. Across the plain grazed Syncerus antiquus, the great African buffalo, a beast with horns spanning 3 meters, curving like twin scythes. They moved in herds so large that dust clouds hung in the air for hours after they passed. Nearby, enormous hippopotamuses wallowed in pools, their bellies gleaming like obsidian. Yet these two could kill without warning. When the tribe approached for water, a bull rose from the shallows, roaring jaws opening wider than a man's chest. They ran, the ground shaking beneath the creature's charge. Even the plant-eaters of this world were shaped for war. And then, there were the other humans. Africa was not ruled by one lineage, but many. In the tall grass, Erectus sometimes glimpsed faces that looked almost familiar, the rounder heads of Paranthropus, the smaller forms of Homo habilis. They lived in their own valleys, foraging roots and cracking nuts with stone. Sometimes, they traded glances, other times, stones. There was no peace, only uneasy coexistence. The continent was large, but hunger was larger. Night on the savannah was another world entirely. When the sun sank, the predators awoke. Hyenas, wild dogs, and the ancient Zenusian, the foreign wolf. They hunted in coordinated packs, swift and tireless. The sounds of their pursuit, snarls, panting, screams, tore through the dark like wind through thorns. Sometimes, the hunters became the hunted. One evening, Erectus followed a scent trail to a half-eaten carcass. They approached cautiously, tools in hand. But from the gloom, yellow eyes flared a pack of hyenas, bone crushers, circling. The air stank of blood and competition. A fight broke out, teeth against stone. A single spark flew as a rock struck another, and for a moment, the night lit up. That flash of fire would be remembered, the beginning of a weapon that needed no edge. Africa was both cradle and crucible. Every challenge burned weakness away and left behind intelligence. The need to outsmart predators forced Erectus to think, to plan, to remember which waterholes were safe, which shadows to avoid. Each scar became a lesson, each hunt a story passed through gesture and mimicry. The young watched the elders chip stone core, turning lifeless rock into lethal geometry. They learned which plants healed wounds, which rivers devoured the careless, and under a sky crowded with stars, they began to dream, not of safety, but of survival. By torchlight, they gazed at the eyes glowing in the dark beyond their camp. Hyenas laughed, lions prowled, crocodiles lurked, but Erectus stood upright, hand clenched around stone, fire flickering between them and the void. Here, in Africa, land of monsters and miracles, the first humans found themselves outnumbered, outmatched, and outgunned by nature. Yet somehow, impossibly, they endured. Each sunrise that followed was a triumph. Each footprint left in the dust, a declaration, we are still here. For this was the archaic safari, a world of tooth and thunder, of courage born from terror. And amid the chaos of predators and prey, one fragile species began to rise above instinct. They were no longer just animals surviving the wild. They were minds learning to shape it. There are nights in the fossil record that never truly end, moments frozen in silence, bones locked in eternal struggle. If we could peel back to a million years of dust, we would see it clearly, a moonless plain, grass whispering in the wind, and eyes, dozens of them, glowing gold in the dark. This was the age of the saber-toothed kings, an empire of predators so deadly that even lions today seemed tame in their shadow. And in that empire, Homo erectus learned what fear truly meant. The dawn comes pale and smoky. A small group of early humans follows a trail of antelope prints through the tall grass. They move quietly, scanning the horizon, unaware that another set of eyes is watching them, low, patient, and silent. In the brush, a Dinophilis crouches, a cat built like a sculpted boulder, muscles coiled, fangs gleaming. Its body trembles with restrained violence. For hours, it has shadowed the humans, every step measured, every breath timed. To this predator, Erectus is not a threat, he is an opportunity. When the wind shifts, the cat lunges, the air splits with a snarl so deep it feels more like thunder than sound. The group scatters, but not fast enough. One falls. The others flee to the safety of rocks, hearts hammering like war drums. The beast drags its prize into the shadows, leaving only silence and the smell of blood. For Homo erectus, survival meant memory. They learned from death. They began to recognize the faint patterns, the way the grass bends, the way the birds stop singing before an ambush. Every loss taught them how to read the world's hidden language. But Dinophilis was only one of the monsters. Across the plains of Africa and the forests of Eurasia stalked the Meganterian, smaller but far more aggressive, its canines curved like daggers, its eyes cold and calculating. Unlike its cousin, it preferred open ground, using stealth and speed to strike. Fossils tell a brutal story, skulls of ancient humans, pierced clean through by Meganterian fangs. They hunted not only antelope and zebra, but us. And yet, ironically, they helped us thrive. When Meganterian dragged down prey, it often abandoned the remains after feeding, leaving behind half-eaten carcasses. Homo erectus learned to follow them, to wait for the beast to leave, to steal what was left. This scavenging, this dangerous dance with death, may have been the spark that pushed humanity toward tool-making, firekeeping, and planning. We were forged, not in comfort, but in competition. Then came the Homotherium, the scimitar cat, larger, faster, and stranger than the rest. Its teeth, long and curved like blades, could slice through hide and artery in a single motion. It hunted in the open, in groups, driving herds into chaos. At night, its roar could be heard for miles low, metallic, almost mechanical. Imagine standing on a rocky outcrop as dusk falls. The sky bleeds red, the wind tastes of dust, and from the valley below comes that sound, a vibration that shakes bone. The tribe gathers close. They clutch stones and bones, their only defense. The leader stares into the gloom, eyes reflecting firelight. He doesn't know the word courage, but he feels it rising like heat in his chest. This is how intelligence is born, not in peace, but in terror. All across the continent, the saber-tooths ruled. Their reign was not one of cruelty, but of balance. Predators shaping prey, prey shaping survivors. Every encounter left a mark. Skulls split by canines, bones scarred by desperate blows, and among them, traces of tools, primitive hand axes, fragments of flint, the first hints of defiance. Homo erectus began to strike back. They learned to throw stones from a distance, to work together, to distract and outmaneuver. In time, they found fire not yet tamed, but stolen from lightning or wildfire. At night, they would feed it bones and branches, watching the sparks climb skyward like stars. The saber-tooths kept their distance from that glow. For the first time in history, fear changed sides. But Africa was not enough. Somewhere in the restless mind of Erectus burned a question: what lies beyond the horizon? Driven by hunger, curiosity, or exile, they began to wander, through dry valleys and river deltas, through forests humming with insects and the scent of decay. And wherever they went, the fanged shadows followed. In Asia, they met Meganterion nihawanensis, with fangs 10 centimeters long and fur striped for camouflage. In Europe, Homo Erectus prowled the tundra. To live meant to share the world with nightmares, to walk the edge between intelligence and extinction. We like to think of ourselves as the rulers of Earth, but back then, we were intruders in a world of predators. Our ancestors did not conquer nature, they negotiated with it. They survived not by dominance, but by learning. Every saber-tooth they escaped made them sharper, faster, more cunning. Every hunt they failed made them patient. And each small victory, a stolen carcass, a night lived through, carved another notch into the long memory of evolution. If you listen to the wind across the African plains today, it still carries echoes of that age, the roar of beasts long gone, the heartbeat of fear that never left us. We inherited it. Every thrill of danger, every story of monsters and heroes, it all began here. Because once, long before we built walls and cities, we stared into the dark and saw eyes staring back. And instead of running, we picked up a stone. The age of the saber-tooths was not the end of humanity's terror. It was the beginning of our rise. Through fangs and fire, through blood and intelligence, we became more than prey. We became the hunters who remember. The African night was never truly silent. Even when the campfires burned low and the wind whispered through the grass, something was always moving in the dark. A rhythm of breath, of claws, and of hunger. For our ancestor, Homo erectus, the day belonged to the sun, but the night belonged to the scavengers. These weren't monsters from nightmares. They were creatures of strategy, clever, relentless, and brutally organized. They didn't stalk alone. They came as shadows in unison, circling the firelight, their calls echoing across the plains, a sound that made the skin crawl. It was the oldest warning in the world, the laughter of hyenas. Imagine this. A small campfire flickers weakly under the moon. A group of early humans huddles close, faces smudged with soot, the bones from the day's kill glistening beside them. For a moment, they think they're safe. They are wrong. From the darkness just beyond the flame, yellow eyes glint, unblinking. The smell of blood from their meal is an invitation. A low growl trembles through the air, followed by another and another, until the sound swells into a dreadful, rising chorus of laughter that echoes across the savannah. The tribe freezes. They know this song. The hyenas have come to collect their tax. The first shape emerges from the tall grass. Its shoulders are massive, its back slopes down, and its jaws are strong enough to shatter bone. This isn't the spotted hyena we know today. This is its ancient cousin Pushecracuta, the giant hyena. Weighing over 150 kilograms, it stood taller than a man's hip. Its massive head turns toward the fire, ears twitching, its eyes reflecting the orange light. Behind it, more follow. A dozen forms, moving with an eerie, coordinated grace. The humans shout, waving flaming branches and throwing stones. One of the hyenas yelps, but doesn't retreat. They've learned the limits of fear. They know these strange, upright creatures can bleed. Then, the standoff breaks. A rush of sound, claws scraping on rock, jaws clamping down, fire scattering sparks into the night. The pack surges forward. The air fills with chaos, screams, growls, and the sickening snap of bone. When dawn finally breaks, the ground is a battlefield, blood on stone, ash on bone, the footprints of both hunter and hunted tangled together. This wasn't a rare event. This was the pattern of existence, a circle of life and death, where no single creature ruled forever. And hyenas weren't the only ones. Running through the open plains was another ghost, the Xenician, an ancestor of modern African wild dogs. They were leaner, faster, and disturbingly intelligent. Where hyenas crushed bone, Xenician dissected flesh with surgical precision. They hunted like soldiers, flanking, surrounding, and cutting off escape with silent commands. Fossils show they were nearly the size of a modern wolf, built for terrifying endurance. A pack of 15 could bring down prey 10 times their own size, and sometimes they stole from humans. Imagine a small band of Homo erectus tracking an antelope carcass. As they get closer, they see the paw prints deep, fresh, and numerous. Then, from the horizon, the pack returns, a wall of silent motion until the very last second. There's no negotiation, only panic, stones flying through the air, and a desperate retreat. The dogs take what's theirs, and the humans vanish, clutching only lessons. And that lesson would shape our species forever. Intelligence must move faster than hunger. The scavenger's world wasn't cruel. It was efficient. Every kill fed a dozen mouths. Lions struck first, hyenas broke the bones, and vultures cleaned the rest. Homo erectus learned to slip into the cracks of this brutal system, not by strength, but by timing. They followed the scent of death the way others followed the promise of rain. When the laughter of the hyenas faded, they crept forward with their stone axes, slicing away still warm flesh and crushing bones for the precious marrow inside. Each scrap was a victory, each meal a small act of defiance against extinction. This constant pressure didn't destroy them, it refined them. Fear became strategy, defeat became data. Every failure tightened the coil of evolution until the mind itself became a weapon sharper than any fang. One evening, a group of Homo erectus sat atop a rocky rise. Below them, the plains shimmered with movement. One of them reached down and struck 2 stones together. A spark, faint but real. Then a thread of smoke curled upward, and finally, a flame. For the first time, the laughter of the hyenas faded. The beasts retreated, confused by this strange new light. That night, something irreversible happened. The circle of death remained, but Homo erectus had just stepped outside of it. They had found their advantage, because fear was never their weakness. It was their teacher. So, the next time you hear the distant call of a wild animal, remember the ancestors who learned not just to survive the noise, but to laugh back. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into our deep past as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories from the dawn of humanity. See you next time. In the age of Homo erectus, rivers were the veins of life and death. They offered everything: water to drink, fish to eat, reeds for tools, coolness from the burning African sun. But in those same waters lurked the oldest predators the world has ever known. They watched from the depths, silent and patient, with eyes like amber coins glimmering above the surface. These were the crocodile kings, ancient lords of ambush, as old as fear itself. Dawn rises over the Turkana basin. The air is heavy, the kind that smells of silt and thunder. A small band of Homo erectus approaches the riverbank. Their skin glistens with sweat, their hand axes slung from belts of woven grass. They are cautious, but thirsty. The youngest of them steps forward first, crouching low to drink. His reflection trembles in the water, then disappears. A ripple, a flash of motion, a scream cut short. From beneath the murk erupts a shape that defies reason. Crocodilus anthropophagus, the man-eating crocodile, 7 meters long, scales black as obsidian, muscles rippling beneath its hide like coiled rope. It clamps its jaws around the boy and vanishes again, leaving only bubbles and a spreading cloud of red. The others stand frozen, too terrified to even run. They stare into the water, waiting for the monster to resurface. It doesn't need to. It will feed below, tearing flesh and bone in the silence of eternity. This was life beside Africa's rivers, a daily negotiation with death. Every sip, every crossing, every fish speared from the shallows was a gamble. You could outsmart lions, you could outclimb leopards, but water was treacherous. It seemed calm, until it wasn't. Crocodilus anthropophagus wasn't alone. Its relatives haunted the continent's waterways. Crocodilus thorbio-narsone, Crocodilus niloticus, and Crocodilus gingerensis, each a relic of an age when reptiles ruled without apology. Some stretched over 25 feet, weighing more than a rhinoceros. Their skulls were so massive that a single bite could crush a femur, and yet Homo erectus had no choice but to coexist with them. Rivers were life. So they learned, slowly, painfully, the patterns of the killers beneath the surface. At dusk, they gathered near shallow pools, throwing stones to test the water. They learned that stillness was danger. They learned that bubbles meant eyes, that silence could scream louder than thunder. They waited until herds crossed first, watching the chaos unfold, hooves thrashing, beasts screaming as jaws erupted from below. Only when the carnage ended did they dare approach the banks, scavenging the remains, and sometimes they fought back. A fossil tells a story better than any myth. At one site near Lake Turkana, archaeologists uncovered the skeleton of a Homo erectus youth, bones scarred with teeth marks, skull fractured, limbs missing. A few meters away lay broken stones, hand axes, sharp flakes, and a single smashed crocodile skull. Did they try to save him? Did they strike in fury? We'll never know, but the evidence suggests something powerful. For the first time, humans faced a god and dared to fight it. The crocodiles were not mindless beasts, they were strategists, older than any mammal, shaped by 200 million years of perfection. They used the sun to warm their bodies and the river to cloak their scent. They could wait for hours, even days, without moving. When prey finally came, gazelle, antelope, human, the attack was instant. There is no escape once you are caught. The bite pulls you under, the roll drowns you, the water swallows you whole. And yet, from this terror, our ancestors learned one of the first and most crucial lessons in evolution: to read danger before it speaks. They began to watch not the crocodile, but the river itself, its ripples, its rhythm, its smell. From this observation grew something deeper than fear: awareness. In the evenings, when the world cooled, the tribe would camp far from the shore. The fire crackled, reflecting in the wide, alert eyes of the survivors. They could still hear splashes downstream, the sound of the crocodile kings feeding. Children huddled close to the flames as elders mimed the story with sweeping gestures, jaws opening, tail whipping, body dragged under. A story passed from mouth to mouth until it became instinct, and that instinct became survival. With each generation, Homo erectus pushed a little closer to mastery. They began to build tools not just for cutting, but for defending: long wooden spears hardened in fire, stones shaped to pierce skulls. They learned to approach water as a battlefield, not a trap. They learned to work together, to move in pairs, to assign lookouts while others drank. From the threat of crocodiles came discipline, and from discipline, cooperation. It's strange to imagine that something so ancient, so alien, could shape the human mind, but it did. The crocodile forced our ancestors to think ahead, to anticipate, to strategize. It turned survival into calculation. Every decision: when to drink, when to cross, when to move, was a test of foresight. And foresight would one day build civilization. Even now, millions of years later, that memory lingers in us. Why do we fear deep water? Why do we feel unease when the surface goes still? Because long before we wrote words, we wrote that fear into our blood. The crocodile kings never needed to evolve. They were already perfect. They outlived the saber-tooths, the mammoths, even Homo erectus himself. They remain today, smaller, perhaps, but no less ancient, no less deadly. When we look into their eyes, we are staring into our own prehistory, a mirror made of hunger and patience. And in that reflection, one truth becomes clear: we survived not because we were stronger, but because we learned to see death coming and to step aside. As the last light fades over the Turkana basin, the river turns black, smooth, and silent. The fire on the shore flickers low. One of the early humans looks out across the water, eyes cautious, remembering the boy the river took. He grips a burning branch, then thrusts it toward the surface. For a moment, the water glows red, and something vast slips beneath the light, unseen. The crocodile king retreats into darkness. The man stays still, his reflection trembling, like the first memory of fear. He doesn't know it, but in that moment, between predator and prey, fire and water, humanity takes another step toward awareness. The step that will one day lead to us. Before we were alone, we had company. Not the kind that walked on four legs or prowled with fangs, but kin. Hands that grasped stone as we did. Eyes that saw the same stars. Voices half-formed, whispering in the dark. They were our cousins, and for a time, the world belonged to all of us. 2 million years ago, Africa was not just a continent, it was a crowded cradle. While Homo erectus sharpened his first-hand axe and learned to master the hunt, other beings moved through the same valleys, the same forests, the same dangers. To modern eyes, they might look like us, but smaller, stranger, more primitive. Yet behind their faces burned the same fire of survival. The first were the Australopithecines, remnants of an older chapter, clinging to the forests as the savanna swallowed their home. They were light, barely 4 feet tall, their skulls small, their eyes wide. They walked upright but still climbed trees to escape the night. Their lives were brief and brutal, but in their shadows began the shape of something human. Then came Paranthropus, the robust ape. Massive jaws, skull ridged like armor, teeth flat and wide as molars from stone. They crushed roots, seeds, tubers, the stubborn food of survival. Their skulls looked almost monstrous, but they were gentle foragers, digging with bone tools and ancient patience. They had strength beyond ours, yet no hunger for conquest. To Erectus, they must have seemed both alien and familiar cousins, built for a different path. One afternoon, beneath a canopy of fig trees, 2 tribes crossed paths. One, tall and long-limbed Homo erectus, hunter of plains. The other, squat and heavy-jawed Paranthropus boisei, eater of roots. For a long moment, they stare across the clearing. The air hums with insects and tension. The smaller ones clutch digging sticks, muttering low. The taller ones tighten their grip on stone axes. No one moves. A bird shrieks. The moment breaks. The Erectus turn away, vanishing into the grass, leaving only footprints and a story neither will remember. Perhaps they never fought. Perhaps they traded glances, even tools. Perhaps one day a lone wanderer crossed from one tribe to another, and something new was born. We'll never know. But in that meeting lay the spark of everything we call human: recognition. Fossils tell the story better than memory. At Olduvai Gorge, in Tanzania, the bones of Homo habilis lie near those of Erectus, 2 species of the same genus, one fading, one rising. They used similar tools, lived in similar shelters, ate similar food. The only difference was subtle: brain size, body shape, a hint of ambition. Habilis, carved stone. Erectus imagined what more it could become. It's easy to forget how close we once were to extinction. For hundreds of thousands of years, there was no guarantee Erectus would win. He was not stronger than Paranthropus, not faster than the predators, but he was restless, a wanderer in spirit. When food ran out, he moved. When danger rose, he adapted. And in that restlessness, the first threads of destiny were woven. Still, not all kin were harmless. Among the grasslands lurked the Dinopithecus, the giant baboon, nearly 6 feet tall, with canines longer than a human finger. They were not apes of peace, but bullies of the plains, raiders of carcasses and killers of the unwary. Fossilized jawbones show that their bite could crush bone as easily as a leopard's. Imagine the scene. A group of Erectus crouched over a fresh antelope kill, flint tools flashing under the sun. From the ridge above, shadows appear, hulking, bristled, eyes burning red. The baboons descend with shrieks that pierce the air. The humans scatter, shouting, clutching tools, throwing stones. One strikes a baboon's skull. Another retaliates, tearing flesh with teeth. Blood and dust mix in the heat. The air smells of iron. When it ends, both sides limp away, proof that evolution was not a ladder, but a battlefield. But not all encounters ended in violence. In some corners of Africa, Erectus and Paranthropus shared watering holes, scavenging in uneasy silence. The land was vast, the dangers endless, and for a moment, survival overpowered pride. They lived parallel lives, one adapting through strength, the other through thought. In the end, thought won. Paranthropus vanished, their powerful jaws becoming relics in the stone. Erectus endured, carrying forward their memory in the whisper of shared blood. By night, when the fire burned low, Homo erectus looked up at the stars, though he did not yet know their names. Somewhere beyond the flickering light, the cries of other tribes echoed. He did not understand the words, but he knew the meaning. We are not alone. There was comfort in that, and fear. Maybe, around another fire, another tribe of almost humans sat doing the same, wondering who watched from the dark. Maybe they too felt the stirrings of curiosity, jealousy, or perhaps that was the first time one species looked at another and thought, what makes them different? That question, whispered without language, was the birth of consciousness. Time, however, is merciless. Species rose and vanished like sparks in the wind. Australopithecus fell first, then Paranthropus, then Habilis. Their fossils hardened in the earth, while Erectus kept walking, carrying the torch of survival into new lands. He crossed deserts and mountains, rivers and plains, never knowing he was leaving his family behind forever. When he finally reached the edges of Asia, the forests grew thicker, the nights colder, and the echoes of familiar voices faded. For the first time in history, one branch of humanity walked alone. The bones of the forgotten cousins still speak from the dirt. Their faces peer back at us through reconstruction, strange, almost human, hauntingly close. They are reminders that our story was not a single path, but a forest of possibilities. We were not the inevitable outcome. We were the lucky survivors. And maybe, somewhere deep in our instincts, in the loneliness that haunts us, in the desire to belong, lives the memory of them. The ones who looked like us, walked like us, dreamed like us, but did not make it. They are gone, yes, but not forgotten. They live in the shape of our hands, in the way we stare at the fire, in the restlessness that keeps us moving forward. Because before we became the only humans on Earth, we were just one voice among many. The Earth shook long before thunder, before men raised cities, before words existed. The ground itself trembled beneath the march of giants. Across the golden plains of Africa, Homo erectus lived among creatures so immense that even the mountains seemed small beside them. This was not a mythic age, it was the ordinary reality of the early human world. A world of tusks, horns, and thunderous hearts. The savannah was alive, but not gentle. Every breath of wind carried the scent of dust and danger, of beasts so large they shaped the landscape simply by walking across it. And in this realm of colossi, a fragile human species dared to survive. The sun burns high above the Rift Valley. In the distance, a shadow moves, vast, slow, deliberate. It is not a cloud. It is a Paleoloxodon reki, the great elephant of prehistory, 4 meters at the shoulder, 15 tons of muscle and memory. Its tusks curve like ivory scythes, glinting white against the horizon. The tribe halts, their hearts beat faster. They have seen elephants before, but never this close. They crouch behind thorn bushes, staring in silence as the beast swings its trunk, tearing up grass with a sound like thunder rolling underground. The earth vibrates beneath their feet. To Homo erectus, this was no ordinary animal. It was a mountain that breathed, a moving god. And yet, even gods could fall. Not by spear or arrow, those did not yet exist, but by patience and hunger. When an old elephant collapsed in the heat, too tired to rise, the tribe gathered. They approached slowly, cautiously, like priests before a shrine. Flint tools flashed in the sunlight, the air filled with the sound of work, stone striking bone, sinew parting under the edge of human ingenuity. The smell was overwhelming, iron rot, life. Children watched wide-eyed as their parents carved meat from a creature 10 times their size. For days they feasted. They cracked the bones for marrow, scraped the hide for water skins, and carried tusks to mark the place. To them, it was not death. It was providence. And somewhere in that act, that mixture of reverence and hunger, the seeds of spirituality began to form. The plains were crowded with other giants too. The Sincerus antiquus, the giant buffalo, roamed in herds like dark storms. Each one weighed 2 tons, their horns stretching nearly 3 meters from tip to tip. They were living weapons, broad as walls and faster than fear. When they charged, even lions fled. But Erectus learned their rhythm when they grazed, when they drank, when they slept standing beneath the acacias. Sometimes, with timing and courage, the tribe crept close to a weakened one. They struck with stones and fire, herding it toward a ravine. The ground shook as it fell, a crash so deep it echoed for minutes. Victory, danger, life. Every kill was a gamble, every success a celebration, every wound a lesson carved into the lineage of humankind. Farther north, they met another colossus, Hippopotamus gorgops, the ancient river giant. It was as heavy as a modern elephant, with eyes high on its skull, like sentinels peering above the surface. It ruled the waters that Erectus feared. But fear did not stop hunger. One night, under a crescent moon, the tribe found a carcass washed ashore. The skin was torn, the belly bloated, but to them it was treasure. They worked by moonlight, slicing flesh, whispering to each other in proto-language, grunts and rhythm, the first hints of story. When the dawn came, the carcass was gone, stripped clean. Only tools and footprints remained, proof that humans could steal from the jaws of nature itself. But not all the titans were prey. Some were reminders of humility. At the edge of the grasslands moved the Dinotherium, the terrible beast, an elephant. But stranger, its tusks curved downward like hooks, its neck long and sinuous. It used those tusks to tear branches from trees, to defend itself, to dig roots from the soil. To see one was to glimpse evolution dreaming. Even predators kept their distance. Only Homo erectus dared approach the trails these beasts left behind, scavenging the branches they uprooted, following their paths to find water. In a way, humans were apprentices, learning from giants, mimicking their instincts, borrowing their strength through observation. Sometimes, the giants did not notice the tiny figures moving between their legs. Sometimes, they did. And when they did, the result was chaos. There are fossilized bones of early humans crushed beneath massive ribs, skulls fractured by blunt force. The savannah did not forgive mistakes. It was a place where curiosity could kill as swiftly as hunger. Yet that same curiosity, that refusal to stand still, was what kept Erectus alive. Because even as they watched these massive creatures, they learned. They mapped migration routes. They learned which seasons brought elephants, which rivers dried last. They followed the herds across the continent, Africa's first travelers, guided by instinct and sky. When night fell and the fires burned low, they told stories in gestures and sounds, stories of giants, of beasts so vast they could crush the earth, of thunder that walked and gods with tusks of ivory. These stories were not just tales, they were memory, survival code, a living encyclopedia etched in fear and awe. To the children sitting close to the flames, the giants were not enemies. They were teachers. They showed what power looked like, what patience meant, and how small but clever creatures might endure in a world that had no mercy. The age of giants would not last forever. Climate shifted, rivers dried, forests turned to dust. The mammoths and buffalo and terrible elephants began to fade, leaving only bones in the dirt. But for hundreds of thousands of years, Homo erectus walked among them, humble witnesses to nature's grandeur. And maybe that's why, even now, when we stand before elephants, something ancient stirs inside us, a pulse of recognition, a whisper that says, "We remember you. We remember the age when your shadows fell across our fires, when your footsteps shook the earth we walked, when we learned, in your presence, what it meant to be small, and still survive, because before we conquered the world, we lived beneath its giants. And in their towering silence, we found something sacred, not strength, not dominance, but the fragile, defiant will to live." The wind bit harder here. It wasn't like the warm breath of Africa. It was sharp, metallic, and endless. When Homo erectus first stepped into Europe, the sun felt distant, the earth foreign, and the very air heavy with warning. This was not a land that welcomed life. It was a frontier carved in ice and stone. For the first time in history, the human fire faced the cold. They came north, through corridors of grass and rock, crossing the highlands of the Caucasus into what we now call Georgia. There, in the shadow of ancient mountains, they built their first camps, rough circles of stone, bone, and courage. We know their faces, their injuries, their tools. They are the Demonsi hominins, our oldest European ancestors, 2 million years old. Their bones tell a story of hardship, healed fractures, worn teeth, signs of age and care. They looked after their wounded, shared food with the weak, guarded one another through the night. They were still wild, yes, but something new was forming, a sense of us. In the freezing winds of the frontier, humanity learned compassion. The land itself was a challenge. The forests were colder, the days shorter, the nights filled with strange cries. The plains swarmed with herds of massive herbivores, bison, aurochs, and woolly rhinoceros, but also predators the likes of which they had never seen. Gone were the lions and hyenas of Africa. Here, the beasts were different. A flicker in the mist, a low growl, then movement, fast, silent, calculated. A meganterion, the European saber-tooth, bursts from the tree line, its jaws flashing with dagger-length fangs. The attack is short, brutal, inevitable. When the screaming stops, only the echo remains, rolling across the valley like thunder. The bones we found at Demonacy bear the marks of those fangs, punctures clean through bone, proof that the frontier was painted in blood. But Homo erectus did not retreat. He watched, learned, adapted. The cold hardened him, the predators sharpened him, the scarcity of food made him clever. He discovered new shelters, caves carved into limestone cliffs, safe from wind and claws. Inside, firelight glowed like a second sun, warming the damp walls and painting the stone with trembling shadows. Here, for the first time, fire was not just stolen from the wild, it was kept. They learned to feed it, to carry embers from camp to camp. A tiny flame became a heartbeat that outlasted the night. Imagine it, a handful of weary travelers, their faces lit by flickering orange light. Outside, the howl of wolves echoing through the snow. They huddled close, sharing warmth and fear, eyes fixed on the only miracle they truly understood. This was the birth of endurance, humanity's first rebellion against winter. Yet survival had a cost. Food was scarce, and every carcass had to be fought for. Europe's cold plains were ruled by the Peshicrocuta breviostris, the giant hyena, larger than any living species, weighing over 150 kilograms. Its jaws could crush stone and skull alike. It did not hunt alone. It waited, watched, and claimed what others killed. One night, near a frozen river, the hyenas came, their laughter high, broken, mocking, carried across the snow. The tribe tightened around their fire, gripping stone axes. Eyes gleamed in the darkness, dozens of them. When the beasts charged, chaos erupted. Snapping jaws, swinging torches, screams. The fire scattered, snow hissed under burning wood, and blood steamed in the frost. When dawn came, the survivors dragged their wounded to the caves. Behind them, red trails stretched across the white earth. These were not moments of conquest. They were trials, proof that to exist in Europe was to earn every breath. Still, not all creatures were enemies. Some were teachers. In the forests, Erectus encountered bears, two kinds: the mighty cave bear Ursus Spelius, and the smaller, fierce Ursus Etruscus, ancestor of the brown bear. When the bears slept through winter, Erectus crept into their abandoned dens, stealing warmth and shelter. Perhaps this was the first human theft of territory, the first quiet claim over nature's domain. The bears returned, of course, and some fossils show what happened next: broken bones, claw marks, crushed ribs. But humanity persisted, undeterred. To hunt here was an art. The prey were massive elk with antlers spanning 12 feet, rhinoceroses armored in frost, mammoths whose shadows stretched like walls. Chasing them across snow required endurance, coordination, and strategy. In this icy theater, Erectus refined the skills that would define us: patience, teamwork, and courage against impossible odds. Sometimes they scavenged from fallen titans. Other times they lured the beasts into traps, narrow ravines, icy lakes, dead-end cliffs. Stone tools evolved, sharper, thinner, faster to make. From the bones of the dead, they fashioned scrapers and points. Necessity became invention. At night, the cold sang. The wind moaned through the valleys, and the stars hung low, like cold embers in an endless sky. Around their fires, they spoke in half-words, gestures, mimicry. They told stories not to entertain, but to remember: where to find water, which caves were safe, which beasts to fear. Storytelling, even in its rawest form, was a survival tool. And somewhere in those nights, among the flickering shadows, the idea of belonging began to form. Not just I survive, but we survive. The first tribe, bound by firelight and memory. Thousands of years would pass before other species joined them: Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and finally us. But the path was already carved in ice and blood by Homo erectus. They were the first to face the cold and refuse to die. If Africa was the cradle, Europe was the test, and they passed it not with strength or speed, but with resilience. They carried fire through blizzards, guarded one another through endless winters, and looked into the eyes of predators without bowing. They taught the earth that small, fragile creatures could endure the impossible if they stood together. When the snow finally melted, their footprints remained, pressed deep into frozen mud. Fossilized now, they tell a story older than memory, that humanity's courage was born not under the sun, but in the cold. The cave was supposed to be a safe haven, a shield from the biting wind and relentless snow, a womb of stone. But inside that darkness, another kind of danger was waiting, ancient, patient, and hungry. When Homo erectus first claimed the caves of Europe, they didn't enter as conquerors. They entered as intruders, because these shelters weren't empty. They were homes already occupied by beasts that had ruled the night long before fire dared to flicker. This was the beginning of the cave wars. Imagine it. The air inside is cold, damp, thick with the scent of fur. At the entrance, firelight trembles, painting the walls in rippling amber. Your tribe moves slowly, stone axes raised, feet silent on the earth. Then, from somewhere deeper in the dark, a sound rumbles low, massive. a living growl that vibrates right through the stone. Suddenly, two eyes open in the blackness, amber, immense, unblinking. The cave bear has awakened. This isn't just a bear. It's a titan over half a ton of muscle wrapped in smoke-colored fur, with claws longer than a man's hand. Its roar shatters the stillness. The humans freeze, their silhouettes caught between the fire and the abyss. Then, chaos erupts. The bear charges. The fire flares. Torches fall, sparks scattering across the stone. One hunter swings his axe, a glancing blow, useless. Another thrusts a burning branch forward, screaming. The smell of singed hair fills the air. The beast recoils, momentarily blinded, roaring its rage. It flees deeper into the cave, the echoes of its fury shaking the very mountain. The humans collapse, shaking. Their fire is still burning just barely, but they have won. For now. Outside, snow drifts past the entrance like silent ghosts. The night is theirs. This is how the first battles for territory began. Not between tribes, but between species human and beast, both claiming the same shelter from the cold. The fossils tell the story our words cannot. Skulls cracked by claws, bones gnawed by teeth, fire-blackened stone where humans fought back. For centuries, caves were battlegrounds. Sometimes humans won and stayed. Other times, the beasts returned and reclaimed their dens. The story repeated with brutal rhythm: gain, loss, blood, and ash. Through it all, Homo erectus learned something new. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was authority. To hold a cave meant to hold the flame. Every night, they fed it, wood, bone, anything that burned. They guarded it as fiercely as they guarded their food, because without it, the darkness always returned, and with it, the predators. Inside, they began to build small hearths, circles of stone where the fire lived like a captive spirit. Its light painted shapes on the cave walls, shadows that danced like ancestors. Around it, the tribe gathered. They sharpened tools, mended hides, and whispered in sounds that carried meaning. The fire became the heart of their world, a line drawn between chaos and civilization. Every flicker was a promise. As long as this burns, we live. But the enemies outside never stopped watching. Wolves lingered at the edges, their eyes reflecting the glow. Hyenas, those tireless thieves of the night, crept near, sniffing the air, laughing that terrible, broken laugh that still haunts our deepest fears. At a site in Spain, archaeologists found the bones of both Homo erectus and the giant hyena tangled together in the same layer of ash. We don't know who attacked whom, only that the cave had burned, and neither side survived. This wasn't coexistence. This was war. As the cold pressed harder each year, hunger became constant. In this desperate world, the tribe split. Some wandered into the white wilderness searching for food. Others stayed, defending the fire. Those who stayed faced the beasts in the dark. In one cave, the walls still bear the marks of those early night soot, claw scratches, cracked stone. Bones of bears lie beside tools of flint, teeth beside ashes. If you stand there long enough, you can almost hear the echoes, the roar, the clash, the scream, and the silence that follows. Those caves were cathedrals before religion, theaters before art. Every scar on the wall was a memory. Yet, out of these brutal years came something extraordinary. The caves didn't just protect life, they shaped imagination. Within the safety of the firelight, humans began to see in new ways. They traced shapes in the shadows, beasts, faces, hands. The first sparks of our tanned, perhaps. The first sense of time flickered to life here, in blood and smoke. When the blizzards finally passed, the tribe emerged. The valley below glittered with frost and light. Behind them, their fire crackled, a tiny sun born inside the earth. They had faced beasts, hunger, and the void itself, and they had endured. They were not yet us, but they had already learned the oldest truth of humankind, that to be human is to guard the light against the endless dark. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the past as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories from our ancient world. The ice had swallowed the land. The rivers froze in silence. The wind screamed like a living thing, tearing across endless plains of white. But against this merciless world, small shapes moved, figures wrapped in fur, faces hidden behind smoke and frost. They were Homo erectus, no longer wanderers of the warm savanna, but hunters of a world made of ice. And this was their age of courage. They learned the rhythm of survival. Every breath of air was measured, every step deliberate. Their fires burned inside rock shelters, flickering against walls crusted with frost. Outside, the earth trembled with the passing of giants, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, titans draped in ice and silence. When Erectus first saw them, they must have seemed like gods carved from snow-moving mountains that breathed steam and thunder. But hunger does not fear gods. Hunger learns. It starts with a scent blood, faint but sharp, carried on the wind. The hunters follow it through the snow, bent low, eyes narrow. In the distance, a mammoth stands dying, wounded perhaps by a fall or another predator. Around it, scavengers circle, wolves, ravens, hyenas. The humans wait. Patience, that was their secret weapon. They knew how to let the cold do the killing. Hours pass. The mammoth's cries fade to a low rumble, then silence. The wolves approach first, then the humans. Flint blades flash, steam rises from flesh. For the first time, Homo erectus cuts into the heart of a giant. The meat is warm and red against the snow. They eat with reverence, not savagery. Every bite is a victory. Every drop of blood is a reminder that even though the world is vast and cruel, they are still here. The bones they leave behind are not random. They are split and cracked deliberately. They select femurs for their rich marrow, ribs for scraping tools, tusks for carving. In these simple acts, the first signs of abstract thought appear. The ability to plan, to choose, to transform death into survival. They are becoming more than just scavengers. They are hunters of opportunity, watching, waiting, and striking when chance allows. One winter, a herd of woolly rhinos trudges through the snow. They are dangerous, unpredictable, capable of crushing any who draw too close. But the humans know the terrain. They know the nearby lake has a thin layer of ice. The tribe gathers, torches are lit, a dozen voices shout, echoing through the white void. They wave fire, they stamp their feet, and the startled rhinos charge. The ground cracks like thunder, ice shatters. One rhino falls, plunging into the freezing water. Its bellows shake the air as it thrashes, and then stops. The silence that follows is pure triumph. For days, they carve its flesh, using stone axes to open its belly, collecting fat for fire and warmth. This wasn't luck. It was strategy, the birth of organized hunting. The world itself seemed to test them. Storms came without warning. Frostbite took fingers, and hunger took the weak. But Erectus adapted faster than any creature before them. They fashioned furs into clothing, used animal bones as needles, and learned to dry meat with smoke. In caves lit by fire, they stored food for the first time. They became architects of survival. In the silence of night, as the wind howled, they sat close to the fire, sharpening tools. A flint shard became an axe, a broken rib, a blade. Hands once made for climbing trees now shaped the future. Each spark from their stone was a whisper of civilization. The giants they hunted were more than food, they were symbols. A mammoth tusk was carried back and carved with lines not for decoration, but for remembrance, marks of endurance. The first art was not beauty, it was survival, written in bone. Children were born into this frozen world. Their first lullabies, the crackle of fire and the distant cry of beasts. They learned to track footprints in the snow before they could speak. They grew up beneath the same stars we see today, though they knew no names for them. To them, the stars were just sparks from the great fire in the sky, proof that warmth existed somewhere above. Sometimes, they failed. At the base of a glacier, bones tell a darker story. A crushed skull, a shattered pelvis, the marks of a mammoth's tusk driven clean through flesh. One mistake, and the hunter became the prey. But even in death, they learned. They studied the remains, the paths of the herds, the seasons of migration. They adapted again and again, until the ice no longer terrified, defined them. The age of ice was merciless, but it was also a forge. It burned away weakness and left only resilience. When they stood before the carcass of a fallen giant, they weren't just scavengers of fortune, they were heirs to endurance. Their fire was small, but their will was unbreakable. As the centuries passed, their children carried this knowledge farther across the globe. Wherever they went, fire followed the eternal companion of humanity's courage. And though the ice would one day melt, and the giants fade into legend, their story would not end. Because in our hearts, the memory of that frozen world still burns. Every time we gather around a fire, we reenact what Homo erectus once did. Defy the cold, claim the night, and whisper to the shadows, "We are still here." Thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story as incredible as we did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of our amazing human past. See you next time. The road east was endless. It wound through deserts of dust and mountains of stone. For Homo erectus *, this was the final migration, a journey not of conquest, but of endurance. They had crossed continents before, but Asia was different. The earth here felt ancient, watchful, and in the depths of its jungles, shadows stirred that belonged to another age. This was the last refuge of giants. The air was heavy and sweet as rain fell in sheets, soaking the furs of the hunters. Every sound was amplified in the damp silence. They moved quietly, because they were not alone. From the shadows came a sound, deep and resonant, like thunder wrapped in flesh. A shape moved behind the vines, and then it stepped into the light. Ah! Gigantopithecus. It was an ape, but unlike any the world has seen since. Its chest was as broad as a boulder, and when it rose to its full height, it towered twice the size of a man. The two species stood facing one another, separated by centuries of evolution. The giant ape tilted its head, curious. The humans froze, awe and terror mingling in their eyes. Then, slowly, the giant turned and vanished back into the jungle's green silence. The encounter would never be recorded, but the feeling would remain. The haunting knowledge that they were not the only thinking beings on this earth. In the centuries that followed, Homo erectus spread through the forests and plains of East and Southeast Asia. They found lands rich with both life and peril, double-horned rhinoceroses, crocodiles as long as boats, and tigers with eyes like fire. Survival here demanded cunning. They learned to live beside the predators rather than against them, moving like shadows and listening like prey. They were no longer just survivors. They were becoming engineers of existence. As the earth changed, so did the challenges. Forests thickened, and the animals grew stranger. But the humans adapted. They sharpened stone into blades fine enough to cut hide. Their camps appeared along riverbanks, marked by circles of charred earth. At Shaokudian, near modern Beijing, we find the traces still, ashes, bones, and tools 1,000,000 years old, yet unmistakably human. This was the home of Peking man. He hunted deer, butchered horses, and guarded his fire as if it were a god. This was no longer a primitive wanderer. This was a creature that understood control. But the jungle did not yield easily. In the night, the tiger came a prehistoric predator, weighing nearly 400 kilograms. When it hunted, silence followed. The humans learned its patterns, knew when to move and when to freeze. They scavenged its kills, leaving behind offerings of bone and ash, perhaps a gesture of respect or fear. Deeper in the forest lurked another hunter, the saber-toothed cat, Meganterian**. To meet one was to meet death itself. Yet the humans persisted. They watched, learned, and carved a niche for themselves between monsters. Among the trees, another presence lingered. Orangutans and gibbons swung through the canopy, like distorted reflections of what Homo erectus once was. When the wind carried the cries of apes, it must have stirred something ancient in their bones, a memory, a question. Were those eyes staring back kin, or ghosts? Thousands of generations passed. They mastered Asia's landscapes, from the hot wet jungles of Java to the frozen mountains of the north. In Java, Homo erectus soloensis the last of their kind, endured longer than anywhere else. Their fires burned in caves until just 100,000 years ago, long after their cousins elsewhere had vanished. They were the last ember of a dying species. And then, one day, they were gone. No final battle, no catastrophe, just silence. Perhaps the climate shifted, or another species errors crossed their path. Whatever happened, their fires dimmed one by one, until only ashes remained. But they left behind something greater than bones. They left the blueprint for endurance, the patience to watch, the courage to adapt, and the will to cross mountains for a chance to live another day. That was their gift to us. If you listen closely in the deep jungles of Asia, you can almost hear them still, the crackle of fire in the rain, the rhythm of stone on bone. They are gone, yet they are everywhere. In our hands, in our hunger, in the fire we still guard. Because long before we called ourselves human, the ghosts of the East had already shown us how to be. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe for more adventures into our deep past, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time. It ended not with war, nor disaster, but with silence. A silence that stretched over jungles, rivers, and plains. A silence where once fire had spoken, and footsteps had echoed. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus had endured everything the world could throw at them. Beasts with teeth like knives, winters that froze the seas, deserts that swallowed the horizon. But even the strongest fire fades if the wind blows long enough. This is the story of how the first humans disappeared, and how, in their ashes, we began. By the time their last embers flickered in the caves of Java, the world had already changed beyond recognition. The climate shifted once more, the great cycles of ice and heat sweeping like tides across the continents. Forests turned to dust, rivers dried, and the herds they once followed vanished into extinction or migration. The familiar became foreign. For Homo erectus, whose strength had always been adaptation, this change was too swift, too cruel. The beasts of Africa and Asia that had shaped them, mammoths, saber-tooths, giant buffalo, began to vanish. The old rhythms of hunting and scavenging no longer worked, and in their place came something new. From the west, shadows moved, quiet, upright, curious. They were different, but familiar. You could look into their eyes and almost see yourself reflected. They were the next chapter. Homo heidelbergensis, Homo floresiensis, Homo sapiens. The last erectus tribes still clung to their coasts and caves, their fires dim but not dead. They hunted small animals, fished in shallow rivers, gathered fruits when the forests allowed. But slowly, generation after generation, their numbers thinned. Every death left a gap that no child replaced. Every storm claimed another village, every drought another family. They had once ruled continents. Now, they were ghosts moving through a world that no longer belonged to them. At the same time, evolution continued its quiet work. From the ancient erectus line emerged new forms, species more delicate, more complex, more attuned to change. Brains grew larger, hands grew more precise. Voices began to form sounds beyond instinct. The first words, perhaps, whispered by firelight. In Africa, Homo heidelbergensis raised its head to the sky. In Europe, their descendants would become Neanderthals, strong and stocky to fight the cold. And in East Africa, under the same sun where Erectus had first learned to stand, another spark ignited. A new species of thinker, dreamer, storyteller. It's strange to imagine that there was once a day, long before memory, when Homo erectus and early Homo sapiens might have looked at each other across the same plain, both with fire in their hands, both with eyes full of recognition and fear. Perhaps there was no hatred between them, perhaps only confusion, the eerie sense of meeting your reflection in the wild. They were not enemies, not yet, but nature has no mercy for repetition. When two species share the same tools, the same prey, the same dreams, one must fade. The archaeological record gives us no grand finale, no battlefield, no cataclysm, only scattered fossils, ancient ash, and silence. At sites like Ngondong and Solo River in Indonesia, we find their last bones, weathered, isolated, fragile as memory. They date to around 117,000 years ago. After that, nothing. The fires of Homo erectus went out quietly, one by one. Not because they failed, but because they had already done their part. They were the bridge, the wanderers who left Africa when the world was still raw, the teachers who learned from lions and storms, the first to carry fire across oceans and mountains. They were the rough draft of humanity, imperfect, enduring, beautiful in their simplicity. Without them, we would never have existed. Even now, traces of them remain in us, in the way our hands fit around tools, in our hunger to travel, in the ache to explore beyond the horizon. Every invention, every migration, every act of defiance against nature's cruelty, all of it was written first by them. They walked so we could run. They burned so we could shine. And perhaps, somewhere deep in our DNA, there is still a whisper from that age. Keep going. Do not stop. Because the lesson of Homo erectus was never dominance. It was endurance. Imagine them one last time, a small band of survivors in a humid Javon valley. The rain has stopped. The sun breaks through the clouds. A few thin figures move among the trees, their furs soaked, their tools worn smooth by time. They gather near a shallow fire, its smoke rising faintly into the mist. One of them looks up, the light touches her face, the same curve of cheekbone, the same wondering eyes that would one day look back from a mirror. She doesn't know she is the last of her kind. She doesn't know that the story is ending. She only feels the warmth, hears the river, and breathes. And somewhere in that breath, we begin. The dawn comes slowly, spilling gold across the sea. The world is reborn again, as it always is. And though their bodies turned to dust long ago, the fire they carried still burns in cities, in stars, in the restless hearts of their children. We are their echo, their continuation, their proof. They are gone, yes, but they are not forgotten. Because every spark that defies the dark, every journey into the unknown, every hand that builds instead of destroys, is Homo Erectus still walking through us. The fire never truly went out, it just changed hands. And that moment of passing the flame was the true birth of humanity.